Hey everyone, Jamie Meloni here, host of That Business Show 2.0, where business becomes a show business. Weekday mornings, 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, available in high-definition video on thatbusinessnetwork.com, and then on demand at the end of the week on iTunes and on YouTube. So today we're going to talk about the art of improvisation, a skill that I love to learn more and more about. I've got Bob Kulhan with me today. He is the author of Getting to Yes and. He is a veteran improv performer, university professor, and consultant. He's going to show us how to improve your odds of success through the practice of improvisation, a set of learnings and experiences that train your mind to react, adapt, and communicate effectively before a crisis occurs. And he's trained with Amy Poehler and Tina Fey. So excited again to talk to Bob Kulhan today. Bob, welcome to the program today.
Thanks very much for having me, Jamie. I'm glad to be here.
So first off, just tell us, why is improv so important to business?
Well, in business improv, the way that we define it is on these three core competencies: reacting, adapting, communicating. Reacting, if you're focused and present in real time at a very high level. Adapting, if you're reacting within parameters or trying to achieve a specific outcome, you're reacting and adapting. And then the subroot to both of these is communicating, as we do not operate in a vacuum. There's always someone with whom you can react and adapt, or something in our environment to which we can react and adapt. And of course, reacting, adapting, and communicating is applicable in a number of different arenas, not the least of which is in business. So when you start looking at those three core competencies, really what you're talking about is, how do you behave with people in real time? How do you develop relationships? How do you make decisions in real time or rapidly? How do you creatively solve problems? How do you innovate? The list will go on and on as it goes toward defining improv.
So give me your background. Were you an entrepreneur and then you found improv? Were you an improvisational actor, then found business? Give me your background before we go on.
Well, I have an undergrad degree from the University of Illinois in Chicago in business, and appropriately enough, it's a BS in business.
Right.
And I was a very good businessman at a very young age, and then in my early mid-20s, I left business completely, even though I was being headhunted by a lot of great Chicago public relations firms and advertising firms. And when I left business, I dove into improvisation, and I committed to improvisation fully with the goal and the sole intent of being a professional improviser, which in the 1990s was an oxymoron. And I burned through my savings account,
right,
trying to prove it that I could do it. And it was in the late 90s that I, upon living years paycheck to paycheck and just struggling to get by, decided I was not performing at the top of my intelligence. And serendipitously, around that time, I had the unique opportunity to collaborate with a Duke University Fuqua School of Business professor to create the world's first improv program in any top-tier business school that would eventually become an accredited program. And I became adjunct and started the company from there.
Okay, so this is a program that students can learn in the college. What college is it at? Which program is it?
Well, I'm an adjunct at the Duke University Fuqua School of Business, and that's where it started. I'm also now an adjunct at Columbia Business School. I teach in their executive education department, so it's C-level status down, and that's really what I teach in my business as well, how to use the tenets of improvisation at an elite level.
How popular is this class among students? I myself would be all over this class, but a lot of business professionals are maybe a little introverted, a little scared of having to think on their feet in an acting type of environment. Talk to me about the popularity of the course at the schools.
Well, if you go back to our first program in 2000, that was the first execution, January in 2000, and you go forward to our 18th iteration, which just took place this last January 2017, you would have seen an evolution that would be hard for you to wrap your mind around. So the MBA students have always been right on top of this. They get it right away. They don't need to be spoon-fed what this is all about. They love the experiential learning aspect and really see the applicability of it, and have since the very first programs. Now, once you start, though, thinking about more veteran, seasoned business professionals, the level of pushback that we got in the 1999, 2000, 2001, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, probably, even, was absolutely tremendous, because you have to go back and think, where was improvisation as an art form at that time in the late 1990s, early 2000s? And the truth was, it was not even accepted in Hollywood. In the industry itself didn't accept improv or improvisers really as a viable talent whatsoever. And once that really started catching hold there in the early mid-aughts in Hollywood, and you saw shows like Curb Your Enthusiasm take off and Hollywood embraced it, then business started embracing it as well. So it's changed considerably how we look at it. Now, 18 years later, businesses and businessmen and women really see the value of being able to adapt at a high level and communicate at a high level.
I can remember watching Whose Line Is It Anyways, which is probably the pinnacle of improvisational skills. Business improv is nowhere near that level of a challenge. I mean, they give those actors and comedians some very, very difficult things to improvise on, and they do tremendous. I try to think of putting myself in those situations, and it kind of scares me, but business improv is nowhere near on that level. And so give us some basic techniques that people can use in business improv, including the title of your book, which is Yes and. I mean, that's a very important lesson that a lot of people should be aware of.
Absolutely. So why don't we start there? That is the cornerstone of improvisation all around the world, that fantastic two-word phrase, yes and. Yes is unconditional acceptance. You give somebody a gift, an offer, an opportunity, a piece of advice, words, reaction, you accept that at face value. And as it relates to business improv, is a bridge to you, and is the bridge to your intelligence, your background, your education, your experiences, your philosophy, your passion. So yes really is thoughtfulness, and is the bridge to how you're thoughtful. And once you really start using yes and on a regular basis, what you're going to find is that simple two-word technique will actually slow the brain down. If you are simply just going to react to what somebody says, you have to be present and focused in the moment at a very high level, which of course leads to presence if we're going the leadership route, or can extend over to mindfulness if you're talking about the awareness of slowing the brain down to be present, simply to react and adapt. Also, there's a level of authenticity that needs to take place, which means that engagement increases as well simply by using this two-word phrase. The most common way, though, yes and is used in business is as a creation or ideation or brainstorming tool, because yes is unconditional acceptance and is what you do with it in a way to contribute to the success or the greater good of the project. So it's a way to postpone judgment using yes and. That doesn't mean abandon judgment. It just simply means defer judgment. Postpone it until you get that collection of ideas. And the byproduct of postponing judgment is not just a collection of ideas. It's a way to show that you value talent. You value the people who are participating and contributing to an ideation session or brainstorming session or basic one-on-one communication and collaboration. So this is just literally the tip of the iceberg using that two-word phrase, yes and it's not the only improv technique that's in the book.
And it works in opposition to the very contradictory or troubling phrase when you say yes but, which is triggers a defensive mechanism in the person that you're speaking to. And I've been through workshops where people have put us through these yes and yes but tests. And so as a business owner in negotiations, you should always be thinking yes and, not yes but, unless absolutely necessary. How would you advise?
Absolutely. So if you're talking about negotiations that you're participating in, or even mediation in which you will have a third party or are the third party helping that negotiation take place, you go back to the Bill Urey book, Getting to Yes, and that's the openness and potential of understanding the root causes of the conflict and getting them in a communicative fashion so that you can ultimately find the answer of this. There is a significant difference, though, between yes and yes but. And since we talked a little bit about the evolution of business improv as improv relates to a general understanding and the population, I think it's important to point out that once upon a time, and not too long ago, as little as about 10 years ago, yes but was viewed as a polite no. So to be as clear as contact lenses, yes but is not a polite no, it's a condescending no. And most people will see past that smoke and mirrors. The smoke will clear up and the mirrors will as well. And people will understand that you are trying to undermine them. You're trying to confuse them. You're trying to make them believe that you are on their side, when in truth, the but will eliminate what was said before it and undermine that relationship.
Currently talking to Bob Kulhan, again, author of Getting to Yes and The Art of Business Improv, a bestseller book. And I know this book is filled with countless tips for business professionals. Availability of the book, Bob, where can people pick this up?
Pretty much anywhere books are sold. Amazon, Books A Million, Barnes & Noble, online,
and
indie bookstores.
And that's good, because a lot of people will call a book a bestseller, and it's a book bestseller for like an hour on Amazon. I mean, he's in storefronts, and so there's a lot of great information inside this book. What inspired you to write the book? We always talk with business owners who have all this knowledge, and we say, write a book, write a book. What made you actually write that book?
I love improvisation fully. It's one of the greatest communication forms out there and one of the greatest art forms ever. And I didn't see a book like this anywhere, especially one that, and we haven't talked about this aspect of it, links the experiential learning that improvisation inherently provides to business through high-end academia, and also through behavioral psychology and social psychology and behavioral theory, decision-making, organizational theory. And this is, for the last 16 years, a great passion of mine as well. And so I wanted to articulate why and how the art of improvisation is such an impactful tool in business by underscoring it in those behavioral sciences and real-world experience. So I wanted to fill a niche, and of course, I wanted people to know where I come from in business improv. And lastly, and certainly not least, I wanted a little legacy for my kids. If they want to see what I did, they can have an opportunity to open up the book, and I stand behind it. I'm proud of the book, and I think that's important.
We'll cover some of that theory that you talked about there coming into this next segment. Got to take a break right now. Currently talking to Bob Kulhan, CEO and author of the book, Getting to Yes and you can learn more about him at that website, gettingtoyesand.com, as well as businessimprov.com, and more about us at thatbusinessnetwork.com. So you're listening to That Business Show 2.0. I am your host, Jamie Meloni, where business becomes show business.
Hi, welcome to Yeager's. We just want to take a minute and show you what we're all about. At Yeager's, our primary business is hardwood flooring, although we are remodelers for kitchen, bath, and general construction. We operate a fleet of shop-at-home vans that have all the flooring-type products: hardwood flooring, laminate flooring, tiles, stone, what have you. So we're able to come out first with products in our vehicles and take a look at the setting, how the colors will work, and then to be able to come up with some options and ideas for you. If that's not good enough, we have a large distribution center that we inventory product and have a nice display area.
Hi, Jackie Skelton from JR World Travel here. If you travel, you need a licensed professional travel consultant, not a computer. Your licensed professional consultant can get you more for your time and your money. Value for your money and experience, not marketing salesmanship. When you're sick, you call the doctor. When you need legal advice, you call an attorney. So the next time you want to go on any type of travel, call your licensed professional travel consultant who actually represents you. We specialise in group travel, family reunions, weddings, to escorting large groups or making special arrangements for the disabled. Please call 844-249-0190. We are a full-service travel consultancy offering worldwide concierge service. Air, land, sea, rivers, resorts, locally, nationally and internationally. Remember that number, 844-249-0190.
And welcome back to That Business Show 2.0, where business becomes show business. I'm your host, Jamie Meloni, and we have new episodes each weekday morning, 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on thatbusinessnetwork.com, on demand on iTunes and on YouTube. Talking to Bob Kulhan. He is a best-selling author of the book, Getting to a Yes and, talking about the art of business improv. And I myself love learning about improv. I used to do a little stand-up comedy myself, which is in that same field, not exactly the same. I always say comedians learn their shtick, and if you throw them off track, you probably screwed them up. Improvisationalist comedians are truly a skill in of itself, and if you can learn that skill in business, you're going to be a much more successful entrepreneur. So Bob, in that last segment, you started to talk a little about the theory, the behavioral science behind the business improv. Talk to us as entrepreneurs and how we can better use these skills to get the relationships and to get those successful negotiations in our favor.
Absolutely. So I am a fellow entrepreneur and even specifically pioneering this field of business and improvisation together. And so as an entrepreneur, you really have to have that entrepreneurial mindset. Some of that comes in the form of energy, of course, and how you embody it. And it's also a mental framing wherein you will not give up. If other people have a problem and they can't figure out how to make 2 points connect, entrepreneurs say, it's my job to make them connect. If not, I don't get paid. It's my company. I have to make it work. I have to build these relationships. I have to negotiate. So let's go first to that energy manipulation. You have to have a drive, a fire, if you're an entrepreneur, in order to really execute at a high level. And so improvisers, before we get up on stage, we warm up pretty much before anything, because improvisers deal with the human brain the same way athletes deal with muscles. Meaning specifically, if you want a muscle group to operate at peak potential, what's the first thing you have to do?
Warm up. Use it.
Warm up.
Yeah.
Right. Stretch out a little bit. And as a stand-up as well, before you get up on stage, you're in the zone. You're mentally thinking about your act. If you're really going to go out there and test new material or want to do it to the best of your ability, you're physically in a good state, just like elite athletes are before they go out there and perform. Just like entrepreneurs and even business people who have regular secure employment with a large organization should be doing before key phone calls, before key meetings, before key engagements. Get mentally and physically prepared to perform at elite level. So before a big game, do you think elite athletes are shooting out 20 emails and then just go running out on the court?
No, they're in the weight room doing a little weights and getting the muscles loosened up.
That's right. They're thinking about the competition. They're touching base with their team. They're thinking about what they want to do. They're loosening up their muscles. They're oxygenating their muscles. And that's what we're talking about as well before you go into a meeting. Make sure that you're mentally and physically prepared to perform at elite level. Now, going back to yes and, that was a language technique which definitely can influence other people to communicate more with you and open up that communication, especially in the spirit of a negotiation. Also, though, when used on a regular basis, and here's that behavioral psychology aspect of it, you start priming your brain to think that way. So you think more about the yes, unconditional acceptance, and what can I do about it? So you start thinking more about possibility and potential, and rather focusing on why you can't succeed, or focusing on the parameters in which you're not supposed to succeed, or why you can't break those parameters. There's always ways to figure out how to operate successfully in tight confines. It's just a matter of mental framing.
And improv is not necessarily being funny. I think a lot of people, just because of shows like Whose Line Is It Anyways, associate improv and comedy. Being a good improvisationalist doesn't necessarily have to do with being a comedian, right?
Not at all. That's a specific context for the improvisation. Yet, if you're a foodie and you watch any cooking shows, there's always an improv night when they're pulling ingredients out of a basket or a hat and saying, make it work in a short period of time. Special forces will tell you, and really any military will tell you that plans and planning really is everything. The execution of the plans is rarely where it's going to fall apart or come together. And that's improv right there. Just like athletes take a lot of study and practice in order to make it work, musicians practice, so that when they get out and improvise in their sets, they're ready to perform. The real truth is improvisation succeeds or fails at the pivotal moment when strategy and planning collide with execution.
Interesting.
When those two things come together, that's improv.
Interesting. Can you give us some examples of business leaders in the news who use improv effectively?
Well, I can tell you, let's start first with businesses that perhaps should have embraced change a little bit more and reacted to their competition. You know, very small ones like Blockbuster. Mm-hmm. Never thought people would go to a red box to get movies.
That's an incredible story of failure and failure to innovate. Yeah, I mean, Blockbuster should be dominating the video market. They had control of everything at that time. You know, so
absolutely. Mm-hmm. And Kodak's another parallel example of that. They both thought no one's going to want to avoid going to a store to pick up the box and look on the back to see the movie, or no one's going to want to look at pictures online. They're going to want to hold. Everyone's going to want to continue to hold the pictures, and instead of just going along with the competition and reacting and adapting to the competition, they stuck their heels into the sand and said, we're not moving. And because of that, where are they now?
They're out of business. They're out of business. I know we had a Blockbuster right next to me. It's probably the longest surviving Blockbuster because they just tore it down about 2 years ago. And I'm in Tampa, Florida, and it was right next to my real estate office. But I was surprised that that thing lasted as long as it did. And just, you know, even ironically enough, you mentioned Redbox. I remember when I saw those things sitting in front of 7-Elevens, like, what in the world? Who's going to rent a movie in front of a 7-Eleven? You know, but, you know, who am I? You know, and it definitely worked. And so you got to be able to improvise, got to be willing to innovate to survive in the world of business. Now, what about successful innovators and successful improvisers?
I think we could see a lot of them really in the technology departments. Of course, Twitter, the former CEO, Dick Costello, is a Chicago improviser who actually served time on stage, and he employed those techniques into the offices there, and Facebook is very adaptable. A lot of those .coms and the way that they communicate with each other and have evolved their corporate culture have done so in a very meaningful and impactful way. Then you look at some of the less obvious ones like Cisco, which is moving more from an actual tangible technology to a service-based company. And that's a lot of improvisation. Really, any organization that embraces change and pushes toward the future, it uses the tenets of improvisation, hopefully successfully, to make that happen.
Now, there is divergent and convergent thinking. Why do you need to be kept separate for the generation of killer ideas? Or why do they need to be kept separate, I should say, for the generation of killer ideas?
All right, so divergent thinking, just for those who might need a little refresher, this is a divergent thinking and convergent thinking is a model created in the 1960s by J.P. Guilford. It's a great way to frame why improvisation techniques are important. Divergent thinking is you start with a single point and then you diverge away from it. How many ideas can you come up with? How much exploration can take place? This is about the number of ideas. This is about failing early and failing often. Then draw a line to convergent thinking. This is the whittling down of ideas. This is the fine-tuning of ideas, the judging of ideas, the sorting out of ideas. Now, most great people think it's not great, driven people think it's actually faster to judge on the fly. That's a good idea or that's a bad idea. We can't do that because of these reasons. Give me another idea and I'll shoot it down, or I'll point out the budget that we have or why we've done this in the past and it hasn't worked. And we'll continue to try to get ideas by judging those ideas. And what that does, though, is tell the people inside the meeting that there's a right or wrong way to answer questions, to address problems, to hit a piñata, as if there's only one way to hit a piñata. And what we need to do is go into the divergent thinking phase, create a block of time, 10, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, depending on the problem, and say, for this period of time, we're going to fail. We're going to fail early. We're going to fail often. We're going to make a giant mess. It is about the number of ideas. And in doing so, you teach the people inside that meeting that it's okay to fail. It's okay to bring the best out of yourself by struggling, by exploring, by discovering. You separate that time of divergent thinking from the convergent thinking phase intentionally so that when those people who will invariably shoot down ideas do, they know that that's not going to happen in this block. That will happen in the convergent block. And that convergent block is very important. That's where you clean it up. That's where you separate the good from the bad. That's where the Darwinism of ideas comes to life, and the best ideas will succeed and the worst ideas will die. If you look at divergent thinking as creativity, it's the process of creation, and convergent thinking as innovation, driving that creation to a productive outcome. It's a good way to separate the two.
Now, you've trained and worked with Tina Fey and Amy Poehler. Share with us a favorite anecdote from your working with the two.
Well, you know what? Working with those two was absolutely fantastic. I was a very young improviser. I think this was around 1995 in Chicago, maybe even still 1996. And they were just such caring improvisers. It was such a fantastic experience. They were on the same improv team together. And this is when the improv community in Chicago was so small, and you could go to it like I did on a nightly basis and watch elite level improvisers play. And to watch them perform was absolutely fantastic. And to get the opportunity to, get an arm around your shoulder and have them say, okay, Bob, why don't you try this physicality, or why don't you do this a little bit more? Why don't you do that? It's tremendously impactful. And the one thing that carries over that still resonates so heavily with me was from something that Tina Fey said to me. And she said, Bob, don't be clever. Don't be creative. Don't be funny. Be honest. Mm-hmm. Be present in the moment on stage and do the best you can to support everybody else around you. And that, I think, is a direct carryover into business improv.
Good information. Again, talking with Bob Kulhan, CEO and author of the book, Getting to Yes and, The Art of Business Improv. And people can pick these up at businessimprov.com or gettingtoyesand.com. So, Bob, greatly appreciate you being with me today on the program. I love talking about comedy, improv, business, all that stuff. Good discussion. So thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you very much for having me, Jamie. I appreciate it as well.
Absolutely. And again, gettingtoyesand.com, businessimprov.com, and more about this program at thatbusinessnetwork.com, where new shows air each weekday morning at 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and then made available on demand on iTunes and on YouTube. So please subscribe, leave a comment, leave a review. It helps the show grow and helps get the guests out to more and more people. And if you would like to be a guest on the program yourself, tbsinterview.com for more information on how to come onto the program, tbsinterview.com. You've been listening to That Business Show 2.0 with your host, Jamie Meloni, where business becomes show business.